I built that shop right there. It's a 40 by 60 with 22-foot eaves steel building. It's got a not a 112, it's got a 1/6 roof, so the slope isn't super flat, but anyways, I built this myself. And a lot of people ask, do you think I could build a steel building myself? So we're putting a Barndo in here. I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a second. But people ask me all the time, could I build one myself? Do you think I could do it myself? I built this with no experience whatsoever, and I learned a ton of lessons. It took me 3 weeks building full-time with no experience, myself and my dad, and some heavy equipment. We did everything. It was tough. It was absolutely the hardest thing I've ever built, but the question is, can you build one too? I'm going to tell you what I think. The short answer is yes, you can. The question you might want to ask yourself is, do you want to? It was definitely, it was the hardest thing I've ever built. Hands down the hardest thing. I'm going to tell you why it was so difficult, what I learned, and I actually finished it almost a year ago to the day. The weather was like this. It's pretty miserable, it's pretty cold, it's very windy. So it was tough. If you're thinking of building a steel building, if you're thinking of doing it yourself, you're going to want to watch this video. My name is Brandon, and me and my family are building a homestead in northern Idaho. And we're doing everything. We're building everything ourselves. And we're trying to get as self-sufficient as possible and live a more simple and fun life. So if you're interested in building stuff, homesteading, or just following along as we learn and make tons of mistakes, be sure to subscribe. So we built this thing a year ago. We got a telehandler, we got a man lift, and we got this as a kit. So first thing, when you are shopping for steel buildings, there's a huge price variance between companies. Steel prices have skyrocketed since we bought this, so we were lucky in that steel prices were low, relatively speaking, at the time that we bought this. But I think that they'll probably come back down. Lumber prices spiked as we were buying lumber for the inside. I'll show you what that looks like here. But when we bought our building, we had gotten quotes from several different companies. The companies that were willing to put this together were looking to charge anywhere from $10 a square foot to $15 a square foot. So we were looking from anywhere from $30,000 to I think $80,000. Somebody quoted $80,000. People were really busy to put this thing up. It took me 3 weeks, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it or not. I actually thought it would be a lot more simple than it was, because this thing came as a kit. We got everything unloaded. It came with insulation, steel, and all the fasteners included. The thing that it didn't come with was detailed instructions for this specific setup. It had instructions that were ultra general, and just like, here's how you build a steel building, not here's how you build your steel building. And so that was really tough. It came with a schematic that showed where all of the parts came and where they went, and a diagram, and they were labeled, and so it was pretty difficult to figure out exactly what went where. But that really wasn't the hardest thing. Alright, so this is the inside of the shop. It's 60 by 40, 22 feet to the eaves there. I did that so I could put a 2-story house in here with 10-foot ceilings inside. So it's turning out really good. The thing that was very difficult about this and building up a house, I think it's important that the higher you go, I think the more difficult it is. If you live in a windy area, we weren't expecting the winds. Let me show you. Right now it's picking up. All right, so right now we've got probably 25 mile an hour winds. We pretty regularly, as we were building this thing, had anywhere from 25 mile an hour to 40 mile an hour winds. And so anytime we had something like the panels or just anything, we had to wait for the wind to die down so that it wasn't incredibly dangerous. When we put the roof on the last day, the day after was supposed to snow, and so we were really rushing it, trying to get everything going, and there would be gusts of wind up there, and it felt sketchy. And so if you have a windy area, I would say make sure that you're building it in a time that it is not windy, if possible. With the wind, the snow, and the rain all combined, I think made it magnitudes more difficult than if it had been during the summer. With longer days, warm weather, I mean, when you're putting steel up and working and getting bolts and nuts together, your hands get so cold. And so when you're wearing gloves, you're fumbling a lot more and things. So that's really, I think, kind of important to note. So before we got started, we got plans for it. We knew how big we needed it to be, and we had our concrete guy build out our slab. It's extremely important that your slab is square, because when you're placing and doing all your measurements, you want to make sure that everything lines up perfectly and that you don't have any problems with, having something that's too small. If you're building, I think we had a 1/16 of an inch in wiggle room as far as where everything had to go and where things could move. And so it's very tight tolerances. You have to be exact. You have to measure dozens of times. Now, our concrete guy did not want to put the lag bolts in the concrete. He said, if you put them in, it's just going to be a waste of time. You're going to have to cut them off and move them anyways. Just drill holes after. And looking back, he probably was just trying to get out of doing that extra tedious job. It took 3 days of measuring and drilling, epoxying. Also, the ground was frozen. The epoxy took forever to cure. And so if I had done that in the pouring phase and just knocked that all out at once, that would have been much better, probably. I mean, we would have saved 3 days out of 21, which was pretty big. Now, the thing is, we were really trying to be exact, because I think we had about a 1/16 of an inch in wiggle room. So very, very important that you, number one, know what your measurements are, know what your fastener sizes are if you're going to get the bolts pre-put in there. Because you have to, if we would have, for example, got too big of bolts or too small of bolts for these red steel beams, it would have been a problem. Now, I mentioned that these buildings come with plans, but they don't come with specific instructions. And so there was a lot of times, especially with, like, for example, the upstairs windowsills, there was no fastener that attached to the purlins properly. And so you're just kind of going and trying to figure things out. And if you don't have experience with this, you have to expect that there's going to be a learning curve. I would really suggest making sure that when you're building this, you have enough support. I think 2 people can do it together. You need both of them to be able to handle heavy machinery and heavy equipment. I had never driven a telehandler before or lift before, and so it's really not that hard to learn. It just takes a little bit of practice, and you can find a ton of YouTube videos. I'll link to those YouTube videos in the comments that I found. The manufacturers of these heavy machines actually make instructional videos that are really helpful. So take your time and practice, but it's not that hard. It might look intimidating, but you can learn pretty darn quickly. The other thing that I think is really, really important is making sure that you have kind of everything laid out in a way that you don't have to be searching for things. And it's hard to know what you're going to need until you get going. But generally speaking, you put up the red steel in the center first, and then you work your way through. And then you put the sides on, and then you put the insulation goes on between the purlins and the siding, depending if you get the insulation or not. So once we got the skeleton up, it was actually next step that was difficult was getting the insulation up, hanging the insulation, finding a way to hang it up, get it attached properly, and then get the panels on, because it was 6-inch insulation. So looking back and having gone through this now, I think it was definitely cost effective. The insulation has caused, I think, several problems, and I'll talk more about those in just a second. If you're thinking about how to insulate your steel building, obviously you see super cold outside, super warm inside. When you have that hot and cold mixing, you're going to get condensation. So I think that's a really, really important factor to consider. But it was just difficult to get everything to lay together and line up. When you combine the cold and the wind and these panels that are super tall, they catch the wind like a kite, it's difficult, to say the least. So found that using lifts as much as possible to get the items up, attach things to the lift and move it over quickly. We had one panel that bent. I'll show you what that looks like. So I don't know if you can see that right there. We had been lifting up the panel and the wind caught it and it bent over. So luckily that was on the back. But that being said, it was still a bummer that happened, but that was the only one. The other thing that was difficult is I'm walking through here and I have my RV. So we lived in our RV while we were building our shop, and having this little bit of clearance, we couldn't fit the telehandler down this aisle. So especially with the roof and putting the insulation over the top. Not having enough clearance around the entire building really was a setback, and it took a lot more time, in my opinion, to get the roof on. So on top of just trying to figure things out, there really isn't that much good information out there on how to put these together. So you're just going to have to really try to be as organized as possible. Obviously, the first thing that you do is get the outside frame set up, then you get the side panels on, then you get the roof on, then you get all the trim pieces on around it, the roof cap, and that's pretty much it. I found, though, one thing that I didn't know before getting into steel buildings was just the amount of condensation that can really appear, and if you don't have your vapor barrier completely sealed, I'm sure if you have somebody that's building this, that does this for a living, and that does this regularly, they're going to know all of these things. But if you're doing it yourself and figuring it out, really make sure that you have, I think, a good understanding of your plans, of all the parts that you've gotten, and then try as best as you can to get everything organized in a way that you don't have to be constantly looking for stuff, because I think that's really, really important. So, organization, double checking all of your measurements, and then just sticking with it. We didn't have a choice but to get this up, and we were really under the gun for getting the roof on the last day that we got it on, and I honestly didn't think that we were going to be able to complete this. Probably 6 times I was at the point of saying, let's just give up, and I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have a building that's half built. I just did not know. And we just kept pushing through it, and it was definitely difficult. The taller your building is going to be, I think the more difficult it will be to build it, just as a rule, because you have all these very large pieces that you're putting together. The panels are really moving around a lot, and so the shorter that you make it, the easier. But obviously, if you want to build a 2-story house, you're going to have to do what you have to do. So I think if you're remotely handy, if you have yourself and a few friends that can come and help with things, I think if you had 2 telehandlers and a couple lifts, that would be really helpful. If the work area around the outside of your building was clear from mud and debris, it would be much better. And then making sure that you have level areas on the outside too, especially with the lifts. When you get just a little bit off level, you'll get a siren and not be able to go all the way up. So that's always a challenge too, and working against your equipment is no fun for sure. So if you're working in a good time that has good weather, you have a lot of support. And then if you're remotely handy, I have a background doing electrical work. I am not a home builder, but I know how to do things. I would say I'm relatively handy. And so that would be my tip for you. If you have any questions, specifically if you're thinking about building, or if you have any questions, let me know. But I think you can do it. If you set your mind to it, you just can't give up, right? So make sure you stay safe. Make sure that you have safety equipment. And that's one thing, we didn't use any safety equipment. We should have used safety equipment. Tie yourself off, make sure you're safe, and good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. But we'll see you on the next video.